Hey, Embrace. I hope everyone's doing all right so far today. My name is Adam. I'm one of the pastors here at all of our campuses, all of our network churches. To each and every one of you with us online, we are so excited that you are here. I want to start by giving a shout out to two of our network churches, our network church up in Madison, South Dakota, and also our network church in Trimont, Minnesota. We thank God for all that he's doing in and through your church, and we are just thrilled about being a tiny part of it. But again, to all of us, we're so excited that you are with us today. Well, back in elementary school, just like any other small town kid does, I rode my bicycle everywhere. I literally rode my bicycle everywhere. Unless my brother Luke and I were driving my family's golf cart around town, and just a quick side note, no, my family was not rich. But unless we were driving our golf cart, I was riding my bicycle. Any small town kids here ride your bicycle, drive your family golf cart around town? Like ballers. It was awesome, wasn't it? But my family, we lived on the edge of town, and I can remember my bike was an old road bike that my oldest brother won. It was like a speed bike, and I can remember thinking to myself, I am the fastest thing on two wheels. I am a speed demon. And so I had my speed bike. Well, one night I went to visit my friend David. He lived a little ways down the road. And so I rode my bike over to David's house. Fun fact, my friend David lived in a barn. His family had this barn that was transitioned to a house. Legitimately the coolest house in our entire town. But I went over to David's house, and as I turned onto the driveway, remember, I'm riding a speed bike. I'm very athletic, and I'm going incredibly fast speeds. When I turn onto the driveway, my wheels, they shoot out from underneath me, and I end up hitting the ground, and I hit the ground hard. So I stand up, and I am bleeding everywhere from my elbows. I'm like, okay, this is not good. I try to brush it off. I'm a grown 7th grade man. This isn't gonna harm me. So I brush it off, suck it up. I walk my bike up to David's house barn. I set it down. I come in immediately. My friend David's like, dude, are you okay? I'm like, fine, I'm fine. What are you talking about? This is no big deal. I brush it off. I'm good to go. This is not a big deal whatsoever. I'm fine. Well, David got his mom. I'm like, get your mom. Don't get your mom. I'm a 7th grader. We don't need moms anymore. Don't get your mom. I'll never forget his mom. Come on, Mom. She's like putting towels on my arms. I'm like, thanks, David, for stealing my manhood away with your mom. But again, David just kept asking me. He's like, dude, are you okay? Are you okay? Well, I started to get kind of annoyed, and I'm like, I'm fine. This isn't a big deal. Like your mom's now helping me. I'm going to be totally all right. Why do you keep asking me? He's just like, you don't look very good. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, you're kind of like turning a weird color. And as soon as he said this, the room around me began to close in. It was like this dark cloud all around me started to close in to the point that I audibly said, I think it's time for me to get on my knees and lay down right now. And so I did. I blacked out. I couldn't see anything. You see, the truth is something happened to me. An event took place. I was riding my bike. I'm too athletic. I was going too fast. And so I fell over, and I was bleeding from my arms. Like I had physical wounds. And hear this, even if I didn't want to admit them, even if I didn't want to acknowledge them, and I wanted to suck it up and be a man, I couldn't deny the fact that they existed. They existed, and more than that, they impacted me. I couldn't deny it because they did. And so today we are starting up a brand new series called Nothing Good. You see, whether we want to admit it or not, all of us in some way, shape, or form, all of us have experienced wounds. Something that we've done, something that's been done against us, big or small, and it's impacted us in some way. Like an event took place or we experienced something, possibly years ago, maybe even decades ago, that has continued to impact the way we live right now. Wounds that if we do not deal with them, if we do not address them, they will impact every part of our lives in a not great way. Like today, some of us are here and we have wounds that have completely altered and shifted and changed the course of our lives. To be more direct, some of us are here and we're angry, we're bitter, we're anxious, we're fearful, we're addicted, our marriage is struggling. Maybe we're on our second marriage. We have broken relationships. To put it nicely, we're the messed up, jacked up, broken person that we are. Partially because we have wounds that we've never dealt with. Any of that sound familiar? Well, to make matters worse, in the church, we don't like talking about our emotions and our wounds. And some of us, we've actually been taught that all emotions, like any emotions that we feel, are wrong, they're bad, they're evil, they're from the devil himself. And to talk about wounds in a place like church, it feels self-helpish. I mean, so often we completely leave all of this stuff out of our relationship with God. Listen to this, though, to quote one of my favorite all-time authors, Pete Scazzaro says, "You can't be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature." I'm going to say that again just to make sure we don't miss this. You cannot be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature. Or to say it another way, you cannot be spiritually mature if you have wounds in your life that you have not dealt with. Just ask the question, have you ever met someone who's quick to sing about Jesus and Jesus being healer and being awesome, and they know a bunch of Bible verses, and they really look and act like they're this all-knowing Christian, yet the same person is a jerk? Like they know everything about God and they're so deep and wise, and yet the same person, they're bitter, they're critical, they're anxious, they've never said it, but you just always feel like you need to walk around on eggshells around them. Ever met a Christian like this? So they might talk and act and look like they're spiritually mature, but the truth is they're not. Just ask the question, and I ask this out of love. Is this person you? It's always easier to see it in somebody else, but is this person you? Once again, you cannot be spiritually mature if you have wounds in your life that you have not dealt with. And here's the truth. God cares. He does care about our emotions, and he does care about our wounds, and he wants to heal us so that we can become more like Jesus, so that we can experience the abundant life that he has for us. And this right here, it cannot be any further away from being self-help. Instead, it is essential to becoming a spiritually mature, wholehearted follower of Jesus. It's the opposite of self-help. It is necessary. It's required. It is essential to being a spiritually mature follower of Christ. One last thing to mention before we get started in this series. We're going to be talking about wounds and trauma, but I just want to stress the fact that I am not a therapist in any way, shape, or form, okay? I am not a trained therapist. This last week, I met with someone going through some horrible things, and she said back to me, she said, "But I wish you were a therapist." And I said, "But I'm just not a therapist. Like, that's just not me. I'm not trained in that way." But as we planned out this series, we met with and got direction from one of the most respected Christian therapists that I know. Like, in my eyes, she is one of the best of the best. And throughout this series, away from the Bible, the main resource that we got from her and that we use throughout this series is this book called Be Healed by a guy named Bob Schuchts. Again, Be Healed by Bob Schuchts. You can go online. You can get it on Amazon. I did myself. But once again, though, I just want to stress so much. Again, the foundation for a lot of what we're talking about came from this book. And also, I am not a therapist. And so if you're struggling with wounds, if you're struggling with trauma, not drama too, but also trauma, my hope with this series is that it would be a springboard. It would be a starting point for us in our relationship with God, a starting point for us to process our wounds. But as always, I would definitely encourage you to go further and seek out a Christian therapist as well, okay? Okay, so to get us started, today I want to explain what typically happens when we experience a wound of some kind. I mean, often when we're hurt, there's a very clear pattern that we follow. And I think just teaching this big picture and understanding this big picture will be so helpful for this series, but also for our lives. And so, yes, this does set up the foundation for what we're going to talk about over the next few weeks. But I really encourage us to write this stuff down, maybe to take a picture or two, because again, I think just understanding it will bring so much, it will just bring light to the situation, and you'll really bring a lot of understanding, okay? And so to start, here's the pattern. Throughout life, all of us, at some point, we will experience an event, or most likely events that impact our souls. Again, for all of us, at some point in life, we'll experience an event, or plural, events that impact our souls. And this can be anything. Maybe for you, an event is you lost your parent as a kid, or you lost your spouse later on in life. Maybe for you, an event in your story is a divorce, your divorce or your parents' divorce. Maybe an event was being abused. Maybe you look back and there was a decision that you made, and you're just like, I still don't understand why I made that terrible decision. Maybe growing up, your dad wasn't present. Maybe as a kid or as an adult, you were told that you were ugly, that you are worthless, that you mean nothing, that you're garbage. Maybe you witnessed a tragic car accident at some point in life, and you're just like, I don't understand why it impacts me so much. Again, at some point, we will all experience an event that hurt our soul. Big or small, something we've done, something that's been done against us. And with this, something that is so interesting, when we met with this therapist about this series, I found this fascinating. She said 2 people can experience the exact same event, not a similar event, the exact same event. And one person, in seeing that event, can be impacted and traumatized terribly, crippled almost for life. Again, emotionally and spiritually, while the other person who sees the exact same event, grew up in the exact same home and environment, is not impacted whatsoever. But these events, though, they're often the events that we remember, that we don't want to remember. The things that we when we think about, they come to mind that we don't want to think about them. And yet, if we just dig into our past just a little bit, if we dig into our souls just a tiny bit, we can still fully remember all of the details and what happened. Hear this, though, as a result of an event, again, being physically abused, being betrayed by a friend, maybe you did something that blew up your life, being bullied as a kid, as a result of an event, we often will have a wound. From that event, we'll have a wound. Just like me falling off my speed bike because I'm so incredibly athletic and fast, I had physical wounds and I was bleeding. Just like that, we have wounds that impact our souls, things that traumatize us, things that impact us deeply and emotionally. Things that we might try so hard to brush off and act like they're a big deal. And I'm a grown woman, I'm a grown man. These things don't bother me, but we cannot deny the fact that they hurt and they scarred us. And as a result, we have wounds. An example, if our dad left us when we were young, maybe we have the wound of abandonment. Or maybe for you, you did see a car accident as a kid, and ever since then, you've had the wound of fear. And anytime you're in a car and someone else is driving, you're just constantly worried that same thing is going to happen again. Just to share, there are so many different kinds of wounds that we can experience. We mentioned abandonment and fear, but there's also the wound of powerlessness, the wound of hopelessness, of confusion, of rejection and shame. Again, there's all different kinds of wounds that we can have. And friends, just to say it, unfortunately, wounds are a part of life. At some point, all of us as human beings, all of us, we will experience wounds. Here's the deal, though, with your wounds. The biggest question is not whether or not you'll experience wounds. The biggest question that remains is whether or not you will address your wounds. Will you address them? Will you process them? Will you try and heal them? Or will you try and brush them off? Or will you try and act like they don't exist? I'm a grown woman, I'm a grown man, that never bothered me, that did my dad, I don't care, I don't even think about my dad. Will you try and brush them off and act like they don't exist for whatever reason? Will you try to deny their existence? You see, sadly, more often than not, what do we do with our wounds? Nothing. Nothing. Emotionally, spiritually, we fall off our bike, bleeding all over the place. What do? Nothing. We don't address them. We don't even acknowledge them. We don't try to bandage them or clean them or heal them. And as a result, what happens? These wounds, they end up shifting, they alter, they change the course of so much of who we are. And listen to this, when we don't address a wound, instead of finding healing, what happens? We form a belief about ourselves, and we also form a belief about God and who he is. And so if our wound is abandonment, we start to believe the lie that I'm all alone and that no one cares about me, and even God has left me. And if our wound is rejection, we start to believe that I'm not wanted, I'm not desired, I'm not loved by other people, I'm not wanted by my spouse, by my parents, I'm not wanted even by God himself. And if our wound is shame, we believe the lie that I'm bad, I'm dirty, I'm shameful, I'm stupid, and there's no way. God could do it for somebody else, but there's no way. I'm so shameful, God would never, ever want to forgive me. All this is terrible, isn't it? It's horrible. And yet, unfortunately, we typically don't stop here. We don't stop with a belief. Instead, from this belief, we form an inner vow with ourselves. We form an inner vow. Like we consciously or unconsciously, we make this promise to ourselves. Why? To protect ourselves and to cope with life. And a lot of times these vows, they start with the words, I will. I will never trust my dad again. I will never trust another man again. I'll never trust another woman again. I will never let anyone hurt me. I'll never put myself out there with a chance to be embarrassed. To be clear, these vows are not good at all. Again, we make these vows to protect ourselves and to cope with life, yet these vows, what do? They end up keeping us away from others, and more importantly, they end up keeping us away from God and the abundant life that he has for us. We make these vows, not to God, but to ourselves, not in light, but in darkness, to protect ourselves and cope with life, and yet they separate us from all that is good. Once again, there's this pattern that takes place. There's an event that happens. And from that event, there's a wound. And because we usually brush them under the rug, or maybe we're too young to even think about addressing our wounds, we form a belief, and then from that belief, we have an inner vow. Friends, this is the pattern. Okay, so that's a lot to take in. Oh, jeez, dear Jesus, right? You know, so some of you are like, this is brand new information. Others of you would rather have a colonoscopy than talk about your feelings, okay? By the way, if you're 45 years or older, I have a strong recommendation I can get to you. He's great at colonoscopies. Actually, he's never given me a colonoscopy. He's just in my small group, okay? He can read the Bible well. I'm sure he'd do great with other things. You know? Oh, geez. Another reason to join a small group, you know? Half off colonoscopies. You know? He's never told me he'd give me a discount, but I feel like he should give me a discount. I'm a small group leader. Okay. Seriously, though, write this down. Take pictures of it, whatever it might be. It's the foundation of this series. But if this is still confusing for you, I want to go first and share one of my wounds with you to help us understand, but more than that, to go first, just to break the ice. Even if it's just between you and God, even if you don't talk with anybody else, I just want to go first. And so for me, an event, one of the many events that has taken place in my life, I've shared about it before. Back in elementary school, I was picked on. In elementary school, I was picked on, and for me, my event wasn't like a one-time thing. Instead, I was picked on regularly. It was the very first kid in my class to get these bad boys right here. And they were the thick plastic kind, the ugliest pair of glasses your parents could possibly pick out. Mom and Dad, I question if you love me. one point, I had Mickey Mouses on the side of my glasses. Talk about a traumatic childhood. It's right there. But so I was picked on. I was called Four Eyes. Throughout elementary school, I was picked on and just made fun of fairly regularly. And so that was my event. And from that event, what wounds did I have? Well, I had the wound of shame. And I also had the wound of rejection. Maybe some other wounds in there as well. I had these wound of shame and rejection. And from these wounds, what was my beliefs? Well, just to be honest, if you would have asked me what my belief would have been at that point, I would have said that I was a total and complete loser. What's my belief? I would have said, if I was honest, I'm stupid. I'm unwanted. I'm unlovable. And just being totally transparent, that's what I would have said. Like, I had two older brothers who were both popular. I always thought it was funny. A kid would pick on me terribly, and then that kid would randomly start being really nice to me because my older brothers would threaten that kid's life. It's like the hand of God right there working through my older brothers. But my two older brothers were popular until the end of 6th grade when my family moved to a different town. I felt like a total idiot. Just to speak even more candidly, at the end of 6th grade, when my family moved to that new town, I almost immediately had friends, and not just a couple of friends, but a whole bunch of friends. All throughout high school, I had tons of friends. College, tons of friends. Here's the truth, though. Deep down inside me, those core beliefs about myself, they still unfortunately hadn't changed. Instead, I still believed that if people found out that they would reject me. I can remember being a junior in high school. And I worried that my high school friends would hang out with my elementary school friends who are now also high schoolers. I worried they would cross paths or hang out. Why? Because they'd find out the truth of who I was. And they'd reject me. To this day, I still struggle with this. It's why I struggle to stand up here. Why? Because I know the person that I am, good, bad, and otherwise, and I typically focus on the bad and otherwise. Hear this, though. From these beliefs, what's my inner vow that I made? I'll do anything to make people like me. I can remember thinking this in 2nd grade. By the way, my parents never knew that I was whatever. I would say this to myself in 2nd grade, I'll do anything to make people like me. In high school, when I had all kinds of friends, people I didn't even know, just all kinds of friends, I'll do anything to make people like me. In college with girls, I'll do anything to make her like me. Even as an adult, to this day, in my unhealthy state, when I go to that unhealthy place, I'll do anything to make people like me. So how's that for being candid? Okay. Honestly, it's embarrassing. First off, just to say that I was a loser at any point in my life. More than that, to say that it actually still impacts me as a grown adult. And so that's one of my wounds, and I promise I have others. But today, really the action step is this. What about yours? What about your wounds? I know I'm kind of going on holy ground here, but what events have happened in your life? I don't know them. Maybe your folks don't know them, but God does. What events have happened in your life? What were they? Maybe your dad had an affair. Maybe you did. Maybe you were abused. Maybe you witnessed or saw something terrible. Again, what events have happened in your life? And then from those events, what wounds do you have? Maybe it's the wound of abandonment, the wound of fear, the wound of shame. What wounds do you have? And if you haven't dealt with them, what beliefs did you form about yourself? What beliefs are they? Maybe it's the belief if I trust someone, they'll hurt me. Maybe it's the belief that God isn't good. The belief about yourself, I'm not good. The belief that God is angry and he's hard to please. The belief I have no worth unless I do something for you, unless I give myself to you. Maybe it's the belief that things are never going to get better. Maybe it's the belief that the world is out to get me, and that's why you're always just looking to play the victim card. Seriously, what beliefs do you have? As you think about this, the event part might come easier. You might be able to, gosh, I know exactly what the events are, but just to let you know, the wounds and beliefs part might take a whole lot of processing. It might take a lot of conversation with God and maybe between a close friend or a therapist. And then lastly, though, from these beliefs, what inner vows have you made? Vows not with God, but with yourself. Not with light, but with darkness. What bad promises have you made to yourself? What are they? This week, I asked our staff if they could think about bad inner vows that they've made to themselves. Once again, one of mine is, I'll do anything to make another person like me. But when I asked this question, I honestly wasn't really sure what they would say. Almost every single person on our team shook their head yes, that they had made a bad vow, at least one of them in their lives. Again, though, what about yours? What about yours? Maybe your inner vow is, I'll do anything to be loved. Your inner vow, I'll never stick out. I'll never believe in God. Maybe inner vow, I'll never be broke like my parents. I'll never be paycheck to paycheck. I'll never be in this foolish situation that I saw them in. I'll be successful at all costs. I'll never cheat on my wife like my dad. I'll never become my mom. I'll never become that. Again, what inner vows have you made? And friends, I know that this is incredibly hard. It's not fun at all. It can be brutal to start thinking about it, but I'm just saying that this is some of the most important work that you can do in your life. For who? For yourself. Some of the most important work that you can do for who? For everyone around you that you love. For your kids, for your spouse, for your future spouse, for the team that you work with, for the team that you lead. It's some of the most important work that you can do for who? For your relationship with Jesus. For your relationship with God. Okay, so all of this, everything that we talked about so far, it's typically what happens when we experience a wound of some kind. It's a pattern that we follow. And it really sets up the foundation for this entire series. But the truth is, though, God has so much to say about all of this. Again, this opening week really sets up the foundation for this series. But just to be very, very clear, God has so much to say. I'm just saying, as we just got done celebrating in Christmas, God is not some far off, distant God who can't relate with us. He's not some far, distant God who wants nothing to do with us. Instead, God so loves us that he sent us Jesus, and you will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And friends, Jesus was fully God, right? But what we often forget is that he was also fully man. Just to be clear, not fully God and somewhat man, fully God, fully man. What I'm trying to say is that Jesus, God himself, experienced wounds. And not just kind of some wounds, and not just in theory. Jesus' wounds were deep. Our Savior, he suffered. He suffered. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, he experienced some of the deepest wounds that a human being can experience. Don't miss this. Jesus has wounds just like you. Like he's experienced what we've experienced. Have you ever thought about that? As you think about some of the most painful situations, as you think about some of the garbage that people dropped into your life, as you think about just some of the stuff, have you ever thought that God himself has experienced this too? The rejection you felt, God has experienced. The pain you've experienced, God has experienced. Even the shame you've experienced in Jesus. God has experienced. But listen to this, though. When Jesus was wounded, what did he do? What did he do? He didn't form any new beliefs. When Jesus was wounded, what did he do? He didn't make an inner vow to himself apart from God. Instead, when Jesus was wounded, he kept his eyes on God the Father. When Jesus was wounded, he didn't allow his wounds to become his identity. Instead, he kept his eyes on God the Father for his source of all things. His worth, his value, his identity, all of it. And this is the craziest thing, don't miss this. We're told that because of Jesus' suffering, because of his wounds, you and I, we can be healed. We can be healed. Of the garbage from last week, of the things 40 years ago, because of his wounds, we can be healed. Listen to these words from Isaiah. This happened, and these words were spoken hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus arrived, and yet they're all about Jesus. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Now, I want to help us translate this. Surely Jesus took up your pain and he bore your suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he, Jesus, was pierced for our transgressions. Jesus was pierced for your transgressions, my transgressions. And he was crushed for who? For your iniquities, for my iniquities. In the punishment that brought us peace was on him. And by his wounds, you are healed. You're able to be healed. By his wounds, I am able to be healed. Again, Isaiah is saying that Jesus, he took on our pain and he bore our suffering. He was pierced for our crap. He was crushed for our sin. Translation, Jesus was wounded for us. Jesus was wounded for you. And because he was, Jesus has brought us peace. Because he was, Jesus has brought you peace. With who? With God. Peace with yourself. An unexplainable peace that surpasses all understanding throughout life. And because of Jesus' wounds, by his wounds, you can be healed. And so, friends, throughout this series, we're going to talk a lot about wounds and trauma and how to heal. And today, a huge first step is just acknowledging our wounds, just acknowledging it. And we're going to give other practical steps throughout this series as well. But today, the main hope that I want you to hear is that Jesus knows your wounds and he's experienced your wounds. And when you bring your wounds to him, you can find healing. Again, Jesus experienced your wounds and he wants to heal you. He's able. He's able. When you bring your wounds to the broken, wounded Jesus, he can carry them, but he can also heal them. And so in a few seconds, we're going to pray. And as we do, a good first step, this is the first of many steps. A good first step is just acknowledging and bringing your wounds to Jesus. And so today, I just want to encourage you to speak with God, to talk with him about it. And it's just praying this simple prayer, Jesus blank, I'm bringing it to you. And just put your specific wound in there. Jesus blank, I'm bringing it to you. Jesus, I was abused and I'm bringing it to you. Jesus, my husband left me and I'm bringing it to you. Jesus, what I experienced in war when I was serving my country, I'm bringing it to you. Again, friends, what does yours say? Just to acknowledge, sometimes the hardest part is just acknowledging it. It's just naming it. Because in order to name it, you have to face it. It's not going to be really, really, really hard. But again, we're going to pray right now, and I just want to give you just a few moments just to say this to God, to speak it between you and him. Let's pray. Just tell him, Jesus blank, whatever it is, I'm bringing it to you. Bringing it to you. Maybe there's one thing that comes to mind. Maybe there's 4 or 5 things that come to mind. Never told anybody this, God, but Jesus blank, I'm bringing this to you. My whole life, I've tried to brush it off. It's not a big deal, but Jesus, it's impacted me. I'm bringing it to you. Just even thinking about it, just shame, just like tries to take over, abandonment tries to take over. But God, we speak in the name of Jesus against that. Jesus blank, I'm bringing it to you. Father, I'm so thankful that you are the Father that you are. This week, I couldn't help but smile just thinking about David's mom running out to me with towels, just like, come over here. You know? I'm so thankful you're a God who doesn't say, limp over to me and I'll heal you. Crawl over to me and I'll heal you. Get yourself, somehow clean yourself up and then I'll heal you. Instead, you're a God who so loves us that you come to us. You come to us. And you're so gentle with us. You come to us and you approach us and you just have your hands open, just waiting to take these things from us. And so Jesus, I just pray for courage right now and just to bring these things to you. Jesus, blank, I'm bringing it to you, God, that we just hand it over to you as the beginning of healing, as the beginning of freedom, as the beginning of redemption or restoration. God, we just bring these things to you. We just ask that you begin to move, that you begin to restore, that you begin to heal us from the inside out. Lord, we're so thankful that you're a wounded healer, that it's by your wounds that we are healed. We love you. We pray all these things in the name of Jesus. All God's people said, amen.